Day 2 of my video journal. And man, it's waking up today. It's cold today. I'm taking Doxy for suspicion of tick-borne illnesses too. But today I want to talk a little bit about what a midlife crisis, or what my midlife crisis feels like, because it's kind of full of paradoxes. Like I mentioned, it sounds kind of strange to an outsider. So first off, I am pretty certain that this is what I'm dealing with. If you go to any lists online where they talk about, what is a midlife crisis, things like not knowing what's next in life, mood swings, not feeling, sleeping in, things like that, feeling a little depressed, things like that all kind of fit into it. So it's funny because I also, like, growing up, I thought midlife crises were more of a crises. Midlife crises were almost more of like a TV trope, like, because you'd have the sitcom dad get a sports car when they're like in their mid-30s or something like that. So that's not, I doesn't fully explain it, but I would say I have never questioned the things I'm doing as much as I have now. You see, you could say that I kind of already know what to do in a lot of situations. So if I'm feeling purposeful, you could say, well, being lazy, for example, isn't going to help. If you want to, you ever talk about, like, let's just focus on the waking up early thing, because that's always a big thing for me, is I know that the advice I would give someone else would be, well, it's better to kind of act as if you have purpose than it is to try and take forever to try to find it. So if you want to wake up early, then just do it. If you want to exercise more, just do it. Just pick what makes most sense. But there's something to be said of, given that I've reached this point in my life, so again, I'm 37, and to feel like I have not found something that makes me feel like I've done to not have an accomplishment that feels like it's totally my own, makes me wonder how much even doing those basic things actually points me in the right direction. Like, you could say that, say discipline being its own reward. Well, maybe that also has, whenever I've applied that, has only distracted me from figuring out a better direction or something like that. So the motivation to do that then goes away, and you actually start to question. I've started to question, whether or not that's even what I want to do. Now, I have spent some time, honestly, it's raining a little. I have kind of followed that advice, though, by doing this journal. I've chosen that, at least, I think a project that involves introspective thoughts is something that has to be productive. Not to mention, has some of the side benefits of, forcing me to get up early, give me a motivation to at least, work on my shoulders the way I'm doing it. But the other thing that's been going on with this midlife crisis, though, is kind of related to the mood swings. So I've not too long ago, I started becoming very frustrated with myself when I would tell like little white lies. Because I think, in general, honesty is a good thing. Honesty is a good thing as long as you're not like being cruel to someone. Or like say like telling a kid that they're not good at something, for example. Honesty is almost always, being more honest is almost always better. And I guess in some cases it is good to tell a kid that they're not good at something, but like, with not like compared to adults or something anyway. Then the other way that honesty might not always be the best would be, I guess, all right, maybe you're in a negotiation or something. You don't want to tell your negotiating partner your final offer right off the bat, like little things like that. So, but in general, being honest is a good thing. But for me, being honest has been as easy as it might be, because things will happen in my life, and being honest, I have to figure out what I even feel, what even honest is. And in being more honest and letting honest answers slip out, become a lot more blunt, but also a lot more mean in a lot of ways. And also, so I'll give one example, because this one was actually last night. So I was talking through with my daughter, we watching funny little prank videos, and I brought up the idea. I suggested that we prank mommy, and that struck a chord with her. It made her pretty upset, and it was pretty much because she didn't want mommy to get worried in that time during a prank where she thinks something's off. So for example, if we did a prank where, this is a prank we're watching, someone uses like a water jug to make it sound like they're peeing for like 3 minutes. It's like, oh, that'd be funny to do that, or make it sound like one of the boys is peeing for a long time. You're like, play a prank on mom. And that was making her so upset at the thought that mom would be worried about the peeing that she's like almost hyperventilating. Not really, but she's, very emotional about that. And so my wife comes in during this, and I start explaining to her what we've been talking about, because I've been trying to talk my daughter off a ledge for this, to try and calm her down, because I also think this is something that, I don't want her to be anxious about something like this. I want her to, it's an area where she needs to learn her emotions a little bit. But when she came in and started explaining what was going on, I was taking like a fatherly role of like, so mommy, this is what we've been talking about. And I started talking through. And my wife starts discussing, I'm not deciding, I guess I'm just going to refer to her as my wife in these journals. No one's watched the first one yet, so yeah, we'll go with that. Maybe I'll change it later. It's more personal. I'm not going to say my daughter's name though. Anyway, I'll just stick with it for now. So my wife comes in and takes the angle of like, oh, well, she's tired. We should just talk about this in the morning. But kind of cuts off me explaining things to her to say like, so this is what's going on. And I didn't like that, because it felt like she was almost like playing the FBI where I'm the local cop in terms of how to handle our daughter's emotions. And she didn't mean anything by it, and talked about it later, and she had a bunch of reasons why she thought that, like, she thought I was like explaining for her. My wife thought I was explaining to her what was going on for her benefit, not for my daughter's benefit. So it was an honest misunderstanding, but in the moment, as opposed to just say letting my wife, steer the conversation a different way, I was like, time out. We're gonna do this my way, because I can handle it, because I didn't like it because it took to me as she knew better how to parent in the situation, which, again, upon further inspection, that wasn't what she thought. In some ways, she does think she knows more because she sees the kids all day, but I took real offense to that, but almost in a way that I didn't even quite know how to put it into words, because when she started doing that, I was like, accused her of talking over me and saying that I have this handled, But then she was like, okay, so you don't need me here. It's like, no, I need you here. And now you're walking out, you're making this more difficult. It was like one of these things that normally wouldn't have happened. Like 2 years ago, maybe if that had happened, I would have just tried to keep playing at the surface level with this situation. But because that triggered an emotional response of like me wondering like, all right, you know, how good of a dad am I really? How much am I really feeling disrespected as a parent, but partially because I have maybe some insecurities about my handling of the situation anyway, that being honest in that moment was in ways that would have made it into a bigger argument than it would have otherwise been. So midlife crisis Ryan would have came across in much more of a jerk than would have otherwise. And that's also kind of, I don't know, to the extent that I've had mood swings, I guess that's how I would describe it. I don't know, maybe that's not the best story for explaining like what it's like being in a midlife crisis, but those things tend to be happening a lot where I'm realizing the way things actually make me feel. And maybe they make me feel differently than they used to, but it feels like I'm understanding myself at a deeper level. And as a result, I'm letting things out a little bit more. It is at the same time that I'm going through things like questioning whether or not discipline for discipline's sake, or continuing to work hard at things I might have worked hard at time to time before, is actually leading me in the wrong direction towards not having say any like deathbed regrets. So that's a little bit what it's like. A little bit more of an F you or F it mentality. Oh, why am I not? A little bit more of a fucking mentality in terms of, it's like, I don't need to do this or that, you know. Yeah, a couple more examples. I think that's probably good for today. I think tomorrow I'm going to explain a little bit more about this angle of understanding myself at a deeper level and getting rid of inhibitions, because that's a big part of it for me. And maybe tomorrow I'll explain why I feel compelled to do this naked. All right. Man, I feel unsatisfied with this one. But that's partially what I'm doing the journaling, is I'm not happy with my ability to put my thoughts in order. And I think practicing this is going to be more of a good thing. Maybe I'll get a better answer for what it feels like to have a midlife crisis. I like the analogy still of, I feel like a car with only 37,000 miles parked in a parking lot at a nice destination, but I have more driving to do. I'm not sure quite where to drive it, as opposed to just putter around the parking lot, pick people up on one side of the parking lot, go to the other. All right, day 2 of journaling in the books.